Welcome to Cool Cat Teacher Talk. I'm Vicki Davis, and today we're going on a journey together, a journey into the heart of what makes a classroom truly transformational. This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
Here's a question that keeps me up at night. Research tells us that nearly half of teachers, 47%, say their students show little to no interest in learning. Nearly half. But here's what I believe with everything in me. That statistic is not a verdict. It's an invitation for us teachers to rethink how we build our classroom culture from the ground up. Today, we've gathered 4 remarkable educators and thought leaders from around the world, from Australia to Canada to right here in the United States, who are doing exactly that. They're going to share with us how to build relationships that unlock motivation, how to help students see struggle as a pathway rather than a roadblock, how to teach thinking explicitly so it doesn't get left to chance, to empower every voice in our school community, and how to embrace joy, real sustainable joy, even when the work is hard. So whether you're driving to school right now, walking during your planning period, or unwinding at the end of a long day, I want you to know this hour is for you. Let's build something beautiful together.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
We're going to start with that statistic I mentioned. 47% of teachers seeing disengaged students. But rather than despair, I want you to meet someone who's spent over 2 decades cracking the code on human motivation. Darren Franklin, known to everybody as Coach Frank, has this remarkable ability to bridge the football field and the algebra classroom. He understands that whether you're running a play with X's and O's on the football field or solving for X in math, it all comes down to relationships and relevance. Here's Coach Frank on where motivation really begins. Darren Franklin, known as Coach Frank, brings over 2 decades of experience in education, athletics, and personal development, and now owns F42 Empowerment. His insights on human performance and empowerment will give us some valuable perspectives to address some of our most pressing issues as K-12 educators. So, Coach Frank, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Vicki, for having me. I'm excited about this opportunity.
Recent research says that 47% of teachers consider students showing little to no interest in learning as a major problem in their classrooms. You work with human performance coaching and motivation. You talk to students about motivation. What's your advice to teachers for where they start for helping improve student motivation?
From the background of coaching and teaching Algebra 1, I had a difficult job, right? Not everybody signs up to be the math teacher and the football coach. So I found out that the particular strategies that I used on the field were the same in the classroom and vice versa. Number one, I made it my mission about learning who those kids were, who my students were during the first week of school. And some of my colleagues could not understand, like, hey, coach, you're not getting into the scope and sequence of things. I want these kids to tell me who they are indirectly, and I'm going to tell them who I am. So the first thing I would always share with teachers is make sure that you're practicing your classroom procedures that first week of school, and really the first 5 days. Before you get into the content, within those procedures, make sure that you're finding out who's in your classroom. Find out what makes those kids tick. Ask them different questions and have them give it feedback. A lot of kids don't like when adults talk at them. That's one thing I use right away in my introduction when I participate in speaking engagements. This is going to be interactive. Number one, you have to be able to find out who those kids are, okay? And being able to read the room as you go throughout the school year. Obviously, we all know you want to be able to greet your students, and you have to be able to read their body language when they're coming in. Those first few minutes of class, if they don't give you that smile at the door, then find out what's going on. I think the second thing that teachers can do is to be vulnerable in the sense of you're being professional, but if you ever make a mistake in class, own it. and put it in front of the kids. They need to know that you're human. For instance, I used to live in the same community that I worked in as a head football coach. And I would always tell my kids and parents, like, hey, if I see you in the grocery store, I'm going to speak to you because I'm human too. We have to better take that superhero cape off, take that costume off that we put on during teaching times and show that you can be vulnerable, that you're human also. I've made so many mistakes solving problems in front of the board as a math teacher or doing something incorrectly as a football coach. And right away, I owned it. Hey, guys, I made a mistake. Hey, class, coach made a mistake at this step. How can I fix it? That shows that you're human. That also shows that you're not a prideful person. You're not worried about having the power. The third thing that teachers can do is to really make relevant lessons. Now, I'm not talking about just going into lesson plans. Find out what kids are interested in. So if you know that some kids, as you go throughout your first week and those first months of school, you have a lot of gamers. You have kids who are mechanics. You have kids who are into cosmetology. You have kids who want to go into entrepreneurship. You have to find ways to integrate those types of things into your lessons. It doesn't have to be the entire part of the lesson cycle. It may just be part of the exit ticket. It may be part of the warm-up. It may be an article that has nothing to do with the content, but you're finding ways to grab hold those kids' attention and you're letting them know that, yes, I do care about the time that we're together in class, but I also remember you telling me, hey, I remember you sharing this that first time of school or when we were doing the activity, we're getting to know one another. Those three things, getting to know the kids in the beginning, being consistent and also being vulnerable, but at the same time, making sure that you're creating relevant lessons so that kids are excited about coming to your class.
Well, you have to relate to educate, and the research demonstrates this. If you look at Hattie's research, the social relationship between students and teachers is actually higher than the academic relationship between students and teachers. They need to know that we care. Now, another thing that you talk about, Darren, is helping kids develop an action plan. And I love this because we know intrinsic motivation always is a better motivator than extrinsic motivation. So, how do you encourage kids when you're talking to them to develop an action plan?
The first thing is just being able to write things down, right? I've shared with students, hey, get an expo marker, write on your mirror in your bathroom, just being able to see some of the things that they want to achieve and write it on their mirrors at home. Maybe if they have calendars that they can write on. Another activity I just did with some students of the Magnificent Male Experience of Xavier University of Louisiana was celebrating small wins. And what we suggested for them as an action thing is anytime you have a small win, showing up to school every day on time for a whole week is a small win for some students, right? Being told that they're loved by someone, even in their family, is a small win. Or just being able to turn in an assignment and the teacher said, hey, you know what? You did a good job. That's a small win. So what I suggested was take a selfie and then edit that selfie, describe what that small win was, and save it in your phone. Because some days we know that life happens. And when you need some encouragement, you can always look back at that time when you celebrated a small win, because those small wins turn into greater gains and greater gains turn into big victories.
That's excellent. I'm going to share that with my students. So here's another aspect. The research shows that 57% of teachers help students with mental health challenges at least a few times a week. Now, we know that we want to refer those, but it's kind of a fact of life of where we are. And so as a human performance coach, how can you help us teachers know how to approach those situations?
All teachers have so many roles that we occupy and fulfill every day. It's just that we don't go to school for all those different roles. We learn on the job, right? I call it earning while you learn it. I also call it acquiring life currency. I used to always ask a student, if I saw a young man or a young woman that looked upset, disappointed, or even crying, I would ask them, hey, do you need to go see a counselor? Because first of all, I want the professional to have that first opportunity. What that does is that goes back to that caring thing, because now that student understands that, okay, coach knows that I can make up this work. He's really concerned about me.
Absolutely. You can't teach an upset child. That's what counselors are for.
Some students don't want to go to the counselor. They have a better relationship with you. I just ask them to step out for me for a second. And depending on how much rapport I have with them, I'll just ask them like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? But it goes back to the first thing I talked about. How much have you learned about your students? How much trust have they accumulated between the both of them? As a teacher, I have to understand that those kids come to school and sometimes they deal with so many things from the time they woke up to the time they get to your class that you can't even imagine. So let's make sure that we understand, yes, the content and their education is important, but as you just mentioned, if they're not in their right frame of thought, it's going to be tough for them to learn that day. So I asked them, hey, what's going on? Would you like to share with me? And I also make it intentional that I'm just listening. I try not to even give any solutions because a lot of students, teenagers, they just really want to be heard. They just needed that space to share with me. I said, now listen, depending on if I give them a solution or not, let's say I didn't give them a solution, I just was a listening ear. I said, now listen, we're going to go back in here and I'm going to need you to participate in class. I've allowed you to let me know what's going on. Unfortunately, I couldn't help you with it right now, but we're going to go in. Obviously, I'm not going to share anything about this conversation, but I really need you to finish this class on top for me.
Yeah.
And most times, 9 out of 10 times, Coach Frank, I got you. Thank you. I'll even ask them,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to go to the restroom, clean yourself up? Do you need to go get some water?
Yeah, I do that too. Just giving them that de-escalation opportunity.
Yeah, you have to be able to do that. Now you got to know your kids because unfortunately, some kids, you just can't give them that option. So you have to be creative about, hey, do you need to just hang out here for a little while and I'll come back and check on you? Do you want to do your assignment out here, right? I mean, all those
That's
different
right.
things you learn over the years, we're the ones that can have the best adaptability skills.
These are all things about human motivation and human performance. There's a really important concept called keystone habits. Charles Duhigg, writes about the keystone habits, like making up your bed. That particular habit influences everything else you do in the day. When you talk to kids about it, what are you thinking?
Those keystone habits are developed from small things that you do on a consistent basis. And if you have success, you want to find out, why did I have success? I need to perform those again so I can give myself a chance to be successful again. Notice I said give myself a chance, right? Because once the day is over, you may not get that same type of day again. Be consistent with your development. Do not be afraid to walk through doors of opportunity. Do not be afraid to fail at doors of opportunities. And also, don't be afraid if your timing is not right. Keep on doing what you're doing if it's leading you toward progress.
So Darren Franklin, Coach Frank, F42 Empowerment. So much of what we do as teachers is build those relationships, work with motivation, help kids on their habits. Thank you, Coach Frank, for coming on the show. This has been really helpful.
Thank you, Vicki. I hope that we're able to impact your audience.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
As Coach Frank says, be consistent with your development. Don't be afraid to walk through doors of opportunity. Don't be afraid to fail. Why not stop right now and think about your small wins from this week? Think about taking a selfie of your victories and saving those for the hard days. And encourage your students to do the same. But we have to remember, when students do walk through those doors, when they do take those risks, they're going to struggle. They're going to feel like they've fallen into a pit. And that's exactly where our next guest comes in. If you've been in education for any length of time, you've probably seen it, the learning pit. It's one of the most widely used illustrations of learning to emerge in the last 20 years. And our next guest is the person who created it. James Nottingham has worked with Carol Dweck on the growth mindset, with John Hattie on visible learning, and he's just released his 12th book called Teach Brilliantly. But what I love about James is that he didn't dream up the learning pit in some ivory tower. He created it in his classroom, teaching fifth graders. Here's James on why struggle isn't the problem, it's the pathway.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
I'm so excited to have James Nottingham with us. He is the creator of the Learning Pit. It's one of the most widely used illustrations of learning to have emerged in the last 20 years. He has worked closely with professors Carol Dweck of the growth mindset and John Hattie of visible learning. And I know those are two that so many of us know as well. You have your 12th book out, which is called Teach Brilliantly. So that's a lot of books, James. And thanks for coming on the show.
It's an absolute delight to be with you, Vicki. Thanks for the invitation.
Let's talk about this illustration, the Learning Pit. Describe it to us and help us understand it.
If you do a search online, you will find find literally millions upon millions of references and illustrations of it. I created it in the 90s because my students had the sense that success should be relatively straightforward. If it was easy, then that's the best thing. And if it wasn't easy, then either that's their fault, maybe it's my fault I hadn't explained things properly. And I wanted students to know that most of the time, success comes from going through all sorts of challenges, stepping out of your comfort zone, being willing to persevere, being willing to collaborate and problem solve. A good example is I ask students, just will you write down your name now on a piece of paper? And of course, they do it quickly. And then I say, so switch hands, now write it again. Once they've done that, I say to them, how much more did you have to concentrate? How much more effort did you have to put in the second time around? And now look at the results. The second one is almost certainly going to look worse than the first one. A lot of people don't like that. They don't like that feeling of effort. They don't like the outcome. And so a lot of people avoid it. Yet that's learning. Learning requires us to step out of our comfort zone. Learning requires us to try things that we don't know how to do, or try the same thing but in a different way. All too many students, and indeed adults, avoid that because they think, yeah, it's too hard. And yet we know Pedagogy 101 is you have to step out of your comfort zone to make good progress, to expand your knowledge, your skills, your attitudes. You have to. So the learning pit describes that. It illustrates the path. Rather than taking one step, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, and hey presto, you're successful. It is you take one step, you take a second step, and then you get worse before you get better. And I'm not trying to scare anybody here. I'm trying to prepare them. That idea of forewarned is forearmed. I'm better prepared if I know that I'm likely to get worse before I get better. And so the illustration shows them that. Then I use the language, the learning pit, to be student-friendly, to demystify this. Tried all sorts of things. I talked about Vygotsky zone of proximal development. The kids are like, you come up with these ideas, you share them, and you just don't know if they're going to hit the sweet spot or whether they're going to be wide of the mark. It seems that the learning pit has caught life of its own to the point that, as I say, if you do a search online, I get millions upon millions of illustrations, and it's lovely, but it's slightly weird that I created it in my classroom teaching grade 5 kids. Now look, it's everywhere.
So you're saying that you're teaching kids learning is hard, and sometimes when you start learning something, you fall in a pit and it gets a little harder, and then you have to climb out. You journey towards that learning goal.
Absolutely. That's in a nutshell exactly what I'm saying. The evidence behind it is if you look at Robert Bjork's work from University of California, he talks about desirable difficulties. So much evidence to show that the harder we have to think about something, the more we have to put effort into learning something, the more likely we are to be able to retrieve that information and that learning when we need it next time. Easy come, easy go. It's all of those sorts of ideas really wrapped up.
So I always talk to my students about the productive struggle required to learn. If it's easy, you're probably not learning. Like if you already come into it, we use 100 in the US. So if you're already at 100, then what have you learned? Because you already knew it. You have to start from somewhere. Now, this reminds me of when I've talked to Chris Dede and he talked about WebQuest, and he would look at it and he would go, oh, they're getting it wrong in certain cases. So are there ever times that where you do that Google search and you look and you're like, okay, this is not what I was saying at all? What are the common misunderstandings about the learning pit?
I have found, funnily enough, quite often in the US particularly, people have kind of heard of the learning pit, and then some have assumed it's something to avoid. That's the biggest misconception. And yes, listen, I don't want to be challenged all the time. Sometimes I want things to go very easily. But if I'm in a learning situation, I know I'm going to need to step out of my comfort zone, which we're not trying to avoid it. We're trying to seek it out, because the more you go through it, the more likely you are to develop agency or efficacy, that sense that I've got this, I can do this, I'm capable of doing this again and again and again. The second part that I would look out for, and it is a smaller thing, but quite a lot of people draw the pit where it starts and finishes at the same height. Now, I didn't used to worry about that, but one of my children is autistic, and his classic approach is, well, Dad, what's the point? Why would you go through all of that effort just to end up at the same point? And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from. So when drawing the pit, I always advocate that people finish it higher than it begins. So you go in at a lower level, you go into the pit, and when you come out with a better, a higher sense of what it is that you've been doing.
So when your students, think back to when you started using this illustration with your fifth graders, when you started, do they have questions? Is there a secret? You already talked about how you have them write with the left hand, and I'm sure that's part of your illustration. But how would a fifth grade teacher share this with his or her students?
So there's lots and lots of resources that you can access. The best starting point is you go to the website learningpit.org. If you visit that, right on the homepage, there's an animated video that is me talking, and then some very clever person is animating an illustration of the pit. And I explain it. It works pretty well for higher elementary, middle schools particularly. The Learning Pit works for any age. If you think that students ought to be challenged and you want them to be willing to step out of their comfort zone and have a better sense of what's coming, then the Learning Pit can work. That's the first resource. The second one, you kindly mentioned the books that I've written. My most recent one, Teach Brilliantly. I've put a section in there where I've given, I'll call it a script, but don't think of it as an actor's script. It's just, here are the key points that I generally make when introducing the Learning Pit to my students. That's a good resource to start with.
I like the illustration because it is how it feels. Of course, we have to know that very often when you start learning something, it's not that you fall into a pit, it's that you realize that you're in the pit because you don't know what you don't know. That is the challenge with students. When you introduce a new topic, sometimes they've never even heard of that topic. When they start grappling with it, they realize, oh, I have a knowledge deficiency and we need to make this climb. So it's not a negative thing. It's not, don't fall into the pit. It's like, okay, you're learning, you're in a pit, we got to climb out, and it is a challenge.
Ordinarily, if we take the cognitive part of learning rather than the physical, typically you start with one or two ideas, or let's say you show me how to use all this recording equipment, watch what you're doing, and I feel safe because I'm with you, you're the expert, you're guiding me through it, you're helping me bit by bit by bit. So it feels straightforward. Then you say, right, James, you're on your own now. Go try it. I forget something. It looked straightforward when you demonstrated it, but I've forgotten something, or I've come across some sort of contradiction or complication where I'm thinking, okay, but should I have done it this way or should I have done it that way? And a lot of times when that happens, people think, oh, this is not for me. They give up really quickly. Whereas if they say, this is naturally what happens in learning, and what I need to do is just go back a step and think, right, so what were the instructions that Vicky gave me? Or who else could I collaborate with? Or maybe I've got all the right parts, but they're not in the right order, so I need to think about sequence. So this is part of being in the learning pit. And similarly, if you take a physical thing, you show a skill and you get them practicing, but then they go and try it themselves, and either it doesn't feel quite as smooth as it did, or it felt really straightforward, but now they're trying to tweak it and make it work inside a game, for example, or with a different group of people. And that's when it gets all very frustrating. And I want students to know that is normal. It's not you. It's not you that doesn't know it. It's not you that are struggling alone. It is everybody. That's what happens when we step out of our comfort zone. And there are things that we can do to work our way through. And I think the most important point about the learning pit is it's not about being in the pit. That is the benefit. It is about learning to go through the pit and out the other side. That's where the benefit comes.
The journey of learning. This is an excellent example. I think this is going to be a great resource for college professors and teachers to listen to this overview. Go to the learningpit.org. I'm definitely going to dig into that video. I teach middle schoolers and I have I'm teaching website design, and there's a little bit of productive struggle or climbing through the learning pit going on right now. So I think that example will be great for my students. His 12th book is Teach about how to create optimal conditions in which all students can thrive. Thank you, James, for coming on the show.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
It's not about being in the pit. It's about learning to go through the pit and out the other side. And that's the difference. And I love the detail about making sure your learning pit illustration shows the students coming out higher than they went in. That's the whole point of the journey. At this point, like to mention the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect is a cognitive bias where individuals with limited knowledge or competence in a specific domain greatly overestimate their expertise. It's because we don't know what we don't know that we start off on that higher ground. Because you might wonder about this metaphor. Well, why does learning start off and you fall in the pit? Well, it starts off that way because we start by thinking we know more than we do. But when we start journeying into a new domain of knowledge, we realize there's a lot we don't know. And then, bam, we fall into that pit. Now, it is our job as teachers to help our students understand this phenomenon and to journey out to be better than they were before. Now, if we're going to ask our students to embrace that productive struggle, we need to give them tools for the climb. We need to teach them how to think explicitly and not by accident. That's exactly what our next guest from Australia has devoted her career to. Let me take you across the globe now to New South Wales, Australia, where Alice Vigors has been on that mission since 2017. That's when she sat in a room with Ron Reichert and was asked a question that stopped her cold. What do you do when you're thinking? What does that look like? Alice realized that if she could not articulate her own thinking, she certainly wasn't helping her students develop theirs. Since then, Alice has written The Thinking Classroom and co-hosts the Teacher Takeaway podcast. Here's Alice on why we can't leave thinking to chance.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Today, we're talking with Alice Vigors. She's a dedicated and passionate educator and author and speaker. In 2022, she published her first book, The Thinking Classroom, Supporting Educators to Embed Critical Creative Thinking. She's taught in a range of K-6 school settings in public, Catholic education sectors in New South Wales, Australia. She believes that every child deserves the best possible education. She is the co-host of the Teacher Takeaway podcast and hosts her own podcast, The Thinking Pathways. Alice is part of my features, the educational podcasters around the world. But a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the talk around education is not by people who are in the classroom or focused on the classroom. And so I'd like to spotlight some of those voices who are really getting into the classroom and what works. Alice, you're really focused on developing a classroom culture where critical and creative thinking are explicitly taught and scaffolded and not left to chance. So what kinds of things are you recommending, Alice?
The easiest place to start is using thinking routines. My favorite one to start with is a see, think, wonder. The prompts are, what is you see, what do you think, what do you notice? Some other things that you're thinking about that it might be related to or connected to, and what are the things that you wonder about this? So it's all kind of using questioning techniques to get the kids to think beyond that surface level and to really explore their own thought patterns, the thoughts of others, and to talk about and weave those into the learning. Look at how the questions that we have and the things that we wonder shape the pathways that we take when we learn, they can be far more enriching to the learning process for the kids than if I just developed a lesson and I taught the lesson, but I actually didn't have that input and that engagement from the kids. Quite often, I find when you use thinking routines and scaffolds in a lesson to draw the kids' thinking out, it really opens you up to being able to really spot those misconceptions that kids might have about a concept or a topic. It's a really good formative assessment tool to see where kids are at, that you can be responsive in your teaching to look at where do I take it. What I love about inviting the kids in through that process is quite often where I thought we would go in the learning, we go off on a tangent, we get where we need to go in the end, but it's far more enriching process for the kids because they have voice and they have a say in what it looks like and how their thinking helps to shape the way that we learn in a classroom.
Are there any common misconceptions that educators have about encouraging student thinking?
That the littlest learners can't do it, whatever it is that you call them in your district. They're very capable of doing deep thinking, and giving them tools and scaffolds to help that enriches the learning that they do. You've got to kind of sit in the pit yourself. The questions that I'm going to ask, they might fall a little bit flat to begin with, but the reason they're called routines is because the more that you do them, the more that the kids get used to them and they become embedded in the way that you do things. You have to, like any good routine, you have to train the kids to be able to do it. The same with developing their critical and creative thinking. We all have the ability to think, but if we're not shown explicitly and taught how to think in particular ways, then we don't have that skill honed to the best of its ability.
So I want you to travel back in time to when you realized how important teaching thinking was. What was the event and the conversations you had with other educators when your light bulb went on about this?
It was 2017. I sat in a conference room with a bunch of other educational leaders. We were listening to Ron Richard. He's quite well known, comes from the States. One of the first things he said, what is it that you do when you're thinking? What does that look like? It took me aback a little bit. It was like, how do I describe what it is I do when I think? I wasn't very clear in my mind about what that looked like or what that felt like, kinds of processes that I use when I think in different ways. The thinking that we do to identify something is very different to the thinking we do when we compare and contrast things. If I wasn't clear about what that looked like, sound like, felt like, then I wasn't articulating that to my students. And it was kind of that epiphany moment for me to go, hang on a minute, if I'm not doing that, then there's no way that I'm helping the kids to be able to do the same. It was the turning point for my educational career to go, I need to be more clear about this and I need to show the kids and model it for the kids and then help them to practice that skill so that when they see their learning intention or they're asked to identify something, to reflect on something, or to apply something, that they know what those verbs mean, but they know what that thinking looks like and what it sounds like and what it feels like, that they can just do that automatically without having to really think about that process in their minds.
So when you have beginning teachers in front of you that are really thinking, okay, I do want to teach thinking routines, where do you start with them?
I start with a scaffold. So the way that I operate in the school that I lead is if I'm wanting my staff to be using thinking routines and I want them to be doing particular practices, then I have to, as the leader, be modeling that. So I will use the See, Think, Wonder is the easiest one. So I'll use those in the way that we might look at data or unpack a student work sample so they can see what that looks like modeled from me so that they have the confidence then to take that back into that classroom and then working shoulder to shoulder with them to make them feel a little bit more confident about their practice and how they build those thinking skills with their students.
So in addition to working in a school, you work with 2 podcasters. What are the most popular topics right now on those podcasts? What are people saying? I want to get at the trends of where is everybody? Is it just all about AI or are we actually talking about other things in education?
We do a little bit of AI, but it's not the focus of conversation. A lot of conversations focus on well-being, educator well-being, leader well-being. Particularly in Australia, that's been quite a big topic focus. We've also looked into different perspectives around the science of learning and the science of reading, really unpacking what effective practice looks like in those spaces and really trying to understand the research and the implications from a range of different perspectives. We talk to academics who bring that research side of things, talk to educators who've taken that research, put it into practice effectively, seeing what that looks like. We talk to beginning teachers about their experience. It's a lot of different topics, but they tend to be the ones that keep reoccurring.
Do you feel like the pendulum is swinging in terms of, for example, the science of reading? That's been a big conversation here in the United States, a shift back towards phonics, a whole language. Everybody was all in. A lot has gone on politically with that particular issue, which it's hard to imagine that reading would be political. But somehow that seems to happen. Are people coming back to the timeless truths? One of the things about the internet is there's definitely a recency bias with it. And so sometimes the timeless truths, we have to be brought back to those. So how would you discuss the shift in the science of reading in particular in Australia?
It's been quite a big movement over the last 5-10 years with a lot of systems in Australia taking that research and going, okay, well, this is what evidence-based best practice says. So this is the way that we're going to shift. Seeing a lot of positive movement in Australia in that space, which is really, really good to see, and a lot of conversations that people are now feeling comfortable to have around the science of reading and the science of learning, and a lot of sharing of best practice that's happening. Educators are more willing to open up their classrooms so other people can see what that effective practice looks like. They're willing to be filmed and things like that. It's definitely moving in the right direction here in Australia. We're seeing a lot of universities shifting their early teacher education programs so that it more aligns with the science of reading and the science of learning, so that our graduate teachers actually have that knowledge and that skill to be able to apply it in a classroom setting, which previously they haven't had. So that was a government mandate that they had to rework those programs so that they were better equipped once they hit the classroom.
So, Alice, have you seen any surprising science come out in your journey of interviewing people around these topics? Anything that you're like, my goodness, that's surprising?
Probably not so much surprising. I always get little takeaways and things that I think, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. Or it might be a particular piece of information where it's like, oh, the way that you've shared that actually makes more sense in this kind of way that I was thinking about this, or it might shift my perspective in a particular area. But nothing like, oh my gosh, life-changing kind of information, just little bits and pieces that kind of help to build the knowledge along the way.
So when you think about all your shows, and I know you have a lot, you have 2 or 3 that come to mind where you're like, oh yeah, that's a great one. That's where somebody should start listening to my show.
One of those will be Nathaniel Swain. So he's quite a prolific powerhouse in education in Australia. He was in a school, he now works for La Trobe University in Victoria, doing some amazing things in education, and he's just so knowledgeable in the science of reading and the science of learning in the space of mathematics. I could just sit and listen and pick his brain forever. We've had him on a couple of times, so definitely starting with him would be one. Another one of my favourites, and it's somebody I've known for quite a long time, has been quite influential in my career, Canadian Trevor McKenzie. Really enjoy listening to him, hearing about the work that he does. Does a lot of work in the inquiry learning space, but breaks down the myths around what that actually means to inquire with your learning. It's not that la-di-da, free-for-all, we're just doing what we want kind of space. He really unpacks what that means and what it looks like. His work is amazing. There's so many. We're in our 6th season at the moment. We've talked to so many people. Oh, John Hattie, always love talking to him. We've had him on a couple of times talking about the visible learning space, which is what my second book is around building that learning classroom. So they're probably my top 3.
Wow. So as we finish up, what is the impact to you from podcasting? Because you're in a school, and sometimes when you're in a school and you do things like you and I do where we podcast on the side, we can get criticism of, oh, how do you have time for that? Is it benefiting our school for you to do this? What's your answer to that question?
My answer would be it absolutely does, because if we're not showing that we're learning, then what's the point? We're lifelong learners. And one of the ways that we do that is by having conversations with others. What better way to do that than to podcast with other educators, pick their brains about what they know in particular topics and get little takeaways and things that we can go back and try. So I think it's the best form of professional development, hands down.
Yes, you actually get to talk to the people that you're reading about. So Alice Vigors is the Teacher Takeaway podcast and Thinking Pathways podcast. She is the author of the Thinking Classroom. Alice, you're in Australia. I'm in the US. It's 7:30-ish, getting close to 8 my time, and it's getting close to midnight where you are. So thank you for staying up late so that my audience could listen to all that you have going on, your work with thinking. My saying I love to say is, we shouldn't play king of the hill. We should make a bigger hill. There's so many educators who are doing remarkable work around the world, and it's important to grow education podcasting. Build your personal podcasting network that you can listen to on the way to work, on your break, on the way home, so that you can get excited and find people who are real educators in the classroom or have really grounded in the classroom in their research. So, Alice, thanks for being that.
That's my pleasure.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
See, think, and wonder. 3 simple prompts that open up entire worlds of student thinking. And Alice is so right that even our littlest learners can do deep thinking when we scaffold it for them. This isn't complicated, it's intentional. Now, we've talked about motivating students, helping them embrace struggle, and giving them thinking tools. But classroom culture isn't about what we do with students. It's also about the culture we create among educators and our staff at the schools. And there's a conversation we need to have about empowering every single voice in our buildings, particularly women who make up the vast majority of teachers and are often asked to carry a heavy load. Our next guest, Dr. Tracee Perryman, is bringing us a message we need to hear. Her latest book, Elevating Women Leaders, Stories of Strength, Survival, and Success, has been an Amazon bestseller since its release. She's also the CEO of Center of Hope Family Services and holds a PhD from Ohio State. Dr. Perryman makes a powerful point. You cannot build a healthy classroom culture if you don't have a healthy school culture. And that means creating environments where every voice, especially women's voices, can speak without apologizing for their existence. Here's Dr. Perryman.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
But today, we are talking, Dr. Perryman, about elevating our women leaders.
It's my pleasure, and it's my passion to speak on this topic as well.
So what is your message about why they need to empower their women leaders?
You've hit on one of the cruxes of the book, and really where I start, and it's about women identifying their unique values and their motivations for what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, to answer your question more directly, we've seen a lot of women exit the workforce, particularly since COVID. I think that anytime you have an entire group of people exit the workforce, exit organizations, you're losing a unique skill set. And you're losing capacities, gifts that make our organization stronger. So for that reason, I think it's going to be very important for employers to look at why women are leaving. I think childcare can be a reason, but if there are other incentives or other reasons to become engaged, then as women, what do we do? When we talk about unique needs, it's very important to start with women understanding what their needs are and being honest with themselves about what their needs and their wants and their desires are. As a society, we have often suggested to women or even imposed on women what their values should be, what their wants should be, what their desires should be, and even the appropriateness of acting on their values and desires. We can only operate from what women are willing to disclose. Otherwise, that's disempowering if we assume that we know what all women need. In the book, Addressing Unique Needs, we start with women first becoming honest with themselves about what their needs and wants are so that we have a baseline to work with.
I was in the business world, and I actually left for a 7-year period to be a stay-at-home mom, a decision I do not regret. But it did take me a while to be honest that needs weren't being met. So, Tracee, can we start with some of the mistakes that schools might make as they're trying to empower their women leaders?
That it starts again with schools going to the root of what their true values are. I think sometimes in organizations, the funding and legislation drives our decision making to the point that we forget about the people that help us carry out the work. So I think that is issue number one. Sometimes, particularly in education, we start to see teachers and ministers as commodities. And because in our society, women are often discouraged from speaking up, and oftentimes women lead homes by themselves, and they have to be mindful of how saying no could hurt their families. Organizations take advantage of that. And they ask women to do things that they don't ask men to do.
I have seen it. Here's the thing that happens is that if you're working all day and you have a million duties and you're doing homeroom and you're doing a club and you're doing prom and you're doing all this other stuff, and then you don't have time to grade and you go home and you want to play with your babies and you want to fix them a good dinner and then you tuck them in and then you're grading until 2 a.m. and you go to sleep for 2 or 3 hours and start it again, that is not sustainable.
I say all the time, education, particularly being a teacher in the classroom, is one of those fields that taxes us emotionally, cognitively, and physically all at the same time. And to add to the list of demands that you referenced is processing the social, emotional, behavioral issues that we encounter in the classroom and having to go home and think about, okay, we had this particular issue with this child and trying to figure out how we're going to address it the next day. And then after we put in place our plan, ask the questions, did I jump to a conclusion too fast? Was I understanding enough? Did I let this go too far? Should I have said something 2 weeks ago? Having to have a justification for the parents, a justification for the principal, and sometimes a justification for the administration and board. And it's not sustainable.
I know a lot of teachers that are caring for aging parents, so it's not just having children. So you said start with empowering women to speak up about the real issues, because sometimes administrators will say, I had no idea until they resigned. And we don't want that to happen either, because getting people to speak up gives administrators the opportunity to try to help them be able to stay, right?
Absolutely. So speaking up can be complicated, right? And that's why oftentimes administrators avoid it. So I think, first of all, building a culture of solutions, solution-focused dialogue is very important. I think also reaching out to mentors and mental health professionals that can help members of the team process everything that's happening. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. And so oftentimes in the first session, when we ask what's wrong, there's so many things going on. It's like, I don't even know. And then everything starts pitching out. And oftentimes administrators are not prepared or equipped to process all those things. I think that's important to have mental health professionals, mentors, to process so that we can equip women to be clear about what they need, what's failing, and to help propose solutions. And I think administrators should take similar training so that they know what solutions would align with best practices. Another thing I suggest that teachers do is review the research on self-care strategies and then also strategies for managing specific types of situations in the classroom. So as women teachers, we often second guess ourselves. And so a lot of our fatigue comes because we cannot come to resolution about our decisions. So I think really looking at the literature on social emotional development of children, the issues that they're facing, appropriate strategies will help us in our decision making. So if I make a certain decision about a specific child, I know that I operate within best practices. And so I can finally come to a resolution and not feel like I didn't do enough.
I used to be one of those women who apologized all the time for everything, even things I didn't do. And as I've matured, I've learned how to get past that and be accountable, be direct, not always second guess. I mean, you can only control what you can control. You can't control that child is exhausted, that child is tired.
I think one of the reasons why women are persistently apologizing is because it's cultural and it's society imposed. We feel as women that we have to placate everyone and everything. And as women, we are often afraid of awkward space. And so if we can feel like we apologize, we feel like we're making our communication more palatable. And so then there'll be a resolution to it, and then the awkwardness will go away, and we don't feel like we are going to be public enemy number one. If we can get past those things, then we can start moving forward with assertiveness that is rooted in actually finding solutions. And I think one of the ways that I address that is in my book. So part of going through values is building a brand. Each one of us has the capacity to build a brand, a personal brand, and then to stand by it. I wrote a poem a long time ago. It was called I Won't Apologize. I want to apologize for how I look. I want to apologize for my hair texture, my skin color, the width of my nose, my loudness, my sassiness, the stiletto heels that I wear when I walk into a classroom. Still loving all of what makes me me. I want to apologize for it. It's my brand and I stand by it. So I think the first step is helping women be comfortable with who they are in their own skin. I think with age, naturally, we do better at this. But I think giving women the language for positive self-talk and really training them to be bold in it and not apologetic for it and keep practicing it until you feel comfortable helps with such issues. Because if we're not apologizing for not giving the child everything that we need, we're apologizing for holding people accountable. We're apologizing for being honest, right?
Honesty is a good thing. Like, why are we apologizing for being honest?
Right. We apologize for being authentic. Oftentimes, women who apologize at work are apologizing in every area of their life. And that goes into the imposter syndrome where we feel like we don't belong. So it just starts with personal affirmation of us being who we are and not being afraid of it, not being apologetic of it, and understanding that everybody has to grow into their position. No one comes having all the answers. We make the best decisions we can with the information given and the resources at the time.
One thing, I work in computer science, and so one of the issues that I have to teach my students is that apps and tools are better when you have diverse people that give you feedback and give you input. And it's a message that we have got to get across to our whole society, or else we're going to end up in a mess with bias in AI, which is already there. More is caught than taught. And so we want to have schools where all the kids see women who are leaders, men who are leaders, that every voice is valued. Like, this is a strategic issue for our future, that we include people and that we respect people for being a human being. Now, sometimes people behave in ways that you don't respect, but as a human being, you have to respect a person. They have value and they have a right to believe as they choose. But as we finish up, could you give a word to administrators about really helping there be a culture where it's okay to be honest and not apologize for it?
I think I would say to administrators to resist the temptation to be afraid. And as administrators, just trust that we have broad enough shoulders to hear the uncomfortable conversations and be motivated by the right things, right? When we treat people well, they're more productive, they're more motivated, and with time, you become more energized than depleted. And I tell myself all the time, you work harder running from issues than you ever do attacking them head. And I think also as administrators of public schools and public funds, resisting the temptation to think that the buildings are ours. I think that's when we get in trouble. Because when we put up an exterior as if the building, this is our domain, then we take responsibility for things that we can't control, and that's how we get in trouble. So when we start thinking about it as our community, then we're more likely to get grace from our teachers and others as support, and we're more in a better position to solve problems together.
Excellent. Dr. Tracee Perryman, her book that's topping the charts is Elevating Women Leaders, Stories of Strength, Survival, and Success. And she's also written Elevating Futures, a model for empowering Black elementary student success. Thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Perryman.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
As I listened to Tracee talk, I remember on my orientation day at Georgia Tech when a young man looked at me and said, "You're just here to get your MRS degree." And then just moments later, after they told us back in those days at Georgia Tech to look to our right and look to our left, that one of us wouldn't be here at the end of the semester. And then another young man leaned over and whispered to me, "You're going to be the one crying on the street corner with your suitcases, waiting for your mom to come pick you up at the end of the semester." On that day, when I went back to my dorm room, I adopted my motto. I may not be smarter, but I can work harder. And I've worked hard and with much prayer and work and the Lord's help, I graduated first in my class at Georgia Tech. I used those 2 comments made to me in orientation, not to take me down, but to spur me forward. Now, certainly my alma mater has changed a lot since then, so my kids and nieces and nephews who graduated from there tell me. But what Dr. Perryman said is true when she says, "I won't apologize for how I look. I won't apologize for my loudness, my sassiness. It's my brand, and I stand by it." That might be the driveway moment of this whole show. How much energy do we waste apologizing for being ourselves, for being honest, for having standards? Dr. Perryman is right. We work harder running from issues than we ever do attacking them head on. Now, after everything we've discussed today, the challenges of motivation, the pit of productive struggle, teaching thinking, and empowering voices, you might be feeling the weight of all of this. And I certainly get it. It's so hard. So let's pause and reflect on what we've heard today. From Coach Frank, we learned that motivation starts with knowing who our students are, really knowing them, and being vulnerable enough to let them know us too. From James Nottingham, we learned that struggle isn't something to avoid. It's something to prepare for and journey through, emerging higher than when we started. From Alice Vigors, we learned that thinking is a skill that must be taught explicitly. See, think, wonder. And that even our youngest learners are capable of profound thought when we give them the scaffolds. From Dr. Tracee Perryman, we learned to stop apologizing for being who we are, to build cultures where solution-focused dialogue is welcome, and to remember that these buildings belong to our communities, not our egos. Here's what I want to leave you with today. Building classroom culture isn't a single act. It's 1,000 small choices every single day. It's greeting students at the door, looking them in the eye, and calling them by name. It's asking, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And it's a celebration of the small wins. It's refusing to apologize for having high standards and a warm heart. And it's finding joy, real joy, even in the middle of the hard things. From the pit to the peak, from struggle to joy, from silence to empowered voices. This is the work, and you, friend, are already doing it as you seek to be a remarkable educator. I'm Vicki Davis, the Cool Cat Teacher. Thank you for spending this hour with me and these 4 incredible educators. Now go build something beautiful. See you later, educator.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. Follow @CoolCatTeacher everywhere you connect.